and this Definders done a lot of twisting and pulling, and then as I pull this out, straight away catches my eye. I can see that the tip of this file is shorter or blunt. Hello, so welcome to this week's Friday's clinical case. And this is a case of something that can happen, and it's quite frustrating. But you'll see as we go through the process of why this has happened, sometimes you can just sort of say to yourself, well, you know, it's just something that can't be helped. And of course, if you've consented the patient for a fractured file and it occurs, then, you know, the patient's took the risk. And as long as you haven't done anything too stupid, you know, this is just one of those things. I want to talk about the case, but before we do, I just want to remind you that, you know, we look at the analytics of the channel on YouTube and we can see that, you know, 50% of the people who watch the videos are not subscribers. So if I could just ask you to do one thing, it's dead easy, it's free, and that's just to hit the subscribe button. It supports the channel, it's really, really nice and easy, and it just spurs me on to do more and more good stuff with root canals. And if you want to bring your support even further, we've got a membership program over at YouTube. It's a small monthly fee. You get to, of course, support the channel further, but you also get early access to content. So I usually work about 3 weeks ahead, so you get 3 weeks worth of videos, and also you got exclusive access to content. We've got a fantastic access video, root canal access video. It's about an hour long. It's a part of a lecture that I do face-to-face, a hands-on lecture, and it's fantastic. Lots of videos, and it's probably one of my main questions that I get off newly qualified dentists or early qualified dentists, how to access the tooth. So if you join the membership program, you can watch that in full. So let's move over to the case. This is a case of an upper right 6. Again, this is another external referral. This was referred to me. I believe a filling was placed. The tooth didn't respond very well to the filling. It started to become painful, and the tooth was brought over to me. We took a couple of x-rays and we found that the tooth had chronic apical periodontitis and irreversible pulpitis. And straight away we're looking at this tooth and it looks highly sclerosed inside. Ironically, where the fractured file ended up was in the MB. In this one, you can actually clearly see a lot of the canal space on the x-ray here. But what we can't see, obviously, is the MB2, and that's where it's fractured today. So we pick up the video with me placing the rubber dam. So we pick up the video here with me placing rubber dam. I've got quite a few surfaces in my surgery, but this is like a small trolley that sits between me and the nurse, and it's a great little focal point. And I've got these fantastic rubber dam clamps, and in fact I've got a rubber dam clamp set for each tooth in the mouth. In this case, of course, we're using an upper 6, and what I like to do is I like to place the rubber dam sheet onto the rubber dam frame before we do anything. So what I'm not doing is I'm not piercing the rubber dam without it being nicely stretched out. And also what this does is it helps you sort of work out where you're going to put the hole for the correct orientation of the tooth. I usually single isolate root canal teeth, just makes it easier and quicker. And then I'm just going to choose a rubber dam clamp. In this case, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the sort of beaks of the rubber dam, the two little points, are going to be gripping the tooth rather than the kind of full sort of surface area of the clamp, and that makes things much, much easier. So in this case, I've got like a kind of a rubber dam clamp which sort of pinches inwards. And as you can see here that I've put it on the wrong way around. I do this a lot. I think maybe I'm going a bit mad, maybe, I'm not too sure. And you'll also notice that I like to put the rubber dam sheet on the clamp and then onto the tooth. You know, some people like to put the clamp on first and then put the sheet over. Me, I think, you know, if you're doing that, you're going to be ripping the sheet all the time and things. And finally, what I do is do a little wiggle. I open up the clamp, give it a little wiggle, and make sure the rubber dam sort of pushes underneath. And this creates like a really, really nice tight seal. We're now ready to do the access. Again, if you're a member of the YouTube channel, watch the access video. It's absolutely fantastic, and you'll know that the shape here is kind of like a triangular sort of rhomboid shape. And what I do is I like to sort of create a small little triangular shape just to find a breach. I'm aiming my burr just on the inside of the palatal cusp because I want to catch that palatal canal. And maybe I'm thinking I've got like a little bit of a sort of a catch there, but I haven't. A bit more refinement, and I've breached the roof of the pulp chamber, and then I'm just going to sort of drill it out, and you can see here now that the pulp chamber is nice and open, and the tooth's been accessed successfully. You could open that up a little bit more, but we've got to think about conserving the tooth tissue. And then the very, very first thing you want to do is you just want to have a little look to see if you can see all of the canal orifices. There's maybe a suggestion in MB2 there, but that's going to be looked for later. And then I'm going to irrigate straight away. In these cases, I'm going to use these Irriflex tips. They have side venting holes for the irrigant. And also, they're quite flexible, so you can get the irrigant tip right down into the canal space. And straight away, we know the palatal is quite wide, so I'm going to go straight for the working length of the palatal. And in this case, I'm using a size 10 K file. And they go straight to length really, really easily, so we like this. We work out the working length is 23 millimeters. So I'm going to use a glide path file. I know it's quite wide and open, the palatal, but I'm just sort of doing my due diligence here. So I'm going to shape the palatal canal with a 1403 at 23 millimeters. Sometimes you'll notice that the palatal canal is really, really wide, and then just as you reach the apex, it narrows quite significantly. And sometimes you have a kind of a bend off to the side, which can be difficult using higher diameter files. And then once we've used our glide path file, I'm now using a 2004. 0.5 millimeters away from the zero reading, so we're going to do it 22.5 here. And these blocks are fantastic. You can just sort of push it in the hole, and you know how long the files are. Although sometimes if you've got a really, really sort of fragile file, using a size 6, sometimes when you're pushing it to length, it can sort of bend and it doesn't work very well. The nurse has got a ready-made syringe for me, so she's got 2 syringes on the go. She's just going to swap them round, so it just makes things easy. And when I'm sort of irrigating or I'm doing something, she'll sort of fill that syringe, so it's a nice easy swap. And then we are going to do our final shaping file with a 2504 in the palatal. And despite the size of this palatal canal, I am using narrow tapered files in this case, but we're not so concerned about that because, of course, we're going to use bioceramic, and this is going to fill the space up quite nicely. So the palatal's all done and dusted. We're now going to turn our attention to the DB canal. I'm going to use an orifice opener here. I feel like the DB canal is quite a narrow opening. I don't want to use too much of this orifice opener because I don't want to take too much of the coronal tooth tissue, but I just need to kind of remove that kind of overhang, so I've got a bit more straight line access with my hand file. And I'm going to just try and get a working length with a DB, but I can't quite get to 0. So I'm just going to measure how far I've reached here, and this is at 21 millimeters. And then again, what I'm going to do here is I am going to sort of get a higher diameter file and shape this a millimeter away from the furthest point reached. So I'm going to use a 1403 at 20 millimeters here. My nurse is just going to get my Definder ready because I'm going to use that to negotiate once I've opened up the coronal to mid-third, this DB canal. We always remember to irrigate, lots and lots of irrigation, get all that debris removed, and then I'm just going to go in with a 1403. Remember, a minus 1 millimeter away from the furthest point reached. Once we've used the glide path file, I'm going to use quite a higher diameter file here, 2504, and this is going to be shaped minus 2 millimeters from the furthest point reached. So in this case, it's going to be 19 millimeters. Whatever you do, and it's really, really tempting to do, is that if you feel like you are reaching down with these files, don't push it any further because you're going to ledge the tooth for sure. So once we've shaped the coronal to mid-third with a higher diameter files, we're going to go in with these Definders. These are kind of smooth shaped hand files. I'm going to measure it to 22 millimeters. Now we know that the furthest point we've reached is 21 millimeters. However, what I do here is I measure it a little bit higher than I've reached, because when I'm negotiating with this hand file, I know the stopper is at 22 millimeters and the furthest point we've reached is 21 millimeters. If I am reaching, if this stopper is starting to reach further down the canal, I know that I'm advancing quite well. So it kind of gives me a sort of a point of reference, and we can see here that I am actually starting to negotiate past that furthest point reach. We're going to pop our apex locator on, and we can see here that the working length is 22 millimeters. So we weren't far off. Perfect. What we've got to do now is we've got to be really, really careful. We're going to measure our 1403 at a 0 reading. And in this case, rather than using the traditional setting with these rotary files, I'm going to use our ToothSaver website painted action here. And this is a 400 degrees clockwise and 30 degrees counterclockwise. And what I'm doing is I'm pushing the glide path file to as far as it can get, and I'm going to turn the motor on and I'm going to sweep it out, because I know that I am really, really struggling to get the end of this tooth, and this is a really, really safe way of negotiating with our normal files here. And then I'm going to use a 1802. So this is another kind of small step up to kind of open these canal spaces up. Again, remembering to do lots of irrigation, lots of recapitulation. And it's the same method. We use now 400 clockwise, 30 degrees counterclockwise. We're going to push the file in as far as it can get off, and then turn it on, and then sweep it out. And then again, lots and lots of recapitulation. I like to use the same hand file, and we can see now that we're ready to do our master apical file, and we're going to use a 2004 in this case, and we're going to do it 0.5 millimeters away from the 0 reading. I'm going to finish on the 20, mainly because I feel like it was tough for us to get to length on this canal, and I don't want to push my luck. I don't want to ledge the tooth. I don't want to fracture a file. So I'm happy that these 2004 rotary files are going to length, and I've got my Irriflex tip, and that's pushing it all in nicely to the end of the tooth. And what you've also got to remember is you want to get rid of all the sort of debris on the flutes, the rotary file. And very simply, the same protocol for the MB1. I'm not going to spend another 10-15 minutes explaining everything. It's just the same sort of thing. Luckily in this case it was more like the palatal. We were getting to length really, really nice and easy, and I didn't need to use the ToothSaver painted method. It was just normal rotary, and we finished on a 2004 in this case. I'm now ready to try and find the MB2. Again, it looks like there's this kind of sort of divot in the kind of the sort of junction between the walls and the floor of this tooth, and sometimes you don't see this and you think to yourself, well, I'm pretty sure there's no MB2, but in this case it looks indicative of maybe there's an orifice there. So what I need to do first off is just to remove the dent and shelf, and I'm using my Ultrasonics. You could use a fast handpiece. Problem that, of course, you've got no control over it, or you've got very little control, and you can cause a perforation or excessive tooth tissue removal. And I'm just trying to trough around, and sometimes some of the debris of the dentin that you've sort of ultrasonically removed collects in the orifice, and that kind of shows you where the orifice is. In this case, I suppose you could argue there's a little bit of that, but you can't really see it. It's not so obvious. And we have just a little bit of a fiddle around there. Nothing's massively obvious, but possibly in this area here we can see there's some type of MB2 orifice. First thing I'm going to do is pick up my size 10 Definder. I could pick up an 8, but I feel like the 8 is a little bit weak. And sometimes if you're trying to sort of push a hand file into like quite a calcified orifice, this can, sorts of hinder you. You can also use size 21s length hand files. This gives it a bit more stiffness rather than normal 25, and no luck really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my irrigant in there. I'm going to give it a bit of a clean out. I'm going to sort of restock, see where I am, see if I can see an orifice, because sometimes at this point I'm thinking to myself, there's no orifice at all. But as we irrigate and clean, we can see there's a very, very small orifice just there, which is a nice feeling, or a terrible feeling, because you're thinking to yourself, well, it's got an MB2 and I've got a bit more time to shape if you're lazy. And in this case, I'm going to use a normal size K file. I think these are a little bit stiffer for me. Got a bit more of a cutting edge on them, and I'm just trying to negotiate as far as it can get. And I've just moved the stopper just to see at what point or how far we've got down. We haven't got down far, but when we measure it, and you can see we've got to about 13 millimeters. And it's at this point we can do two things. We can use higher diameter files and sort of step back. But in this case, rather than using a high diameter file, I'm just going to use a smaller diameter file and see if we can get any further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this 8 defined at 15, remember, gives us kind of a little bit of an idea of if we're negotiating, if we're getting any further when we're sort of going in there. And then as I kind of watch wind this size 8 definder, we can see that I am just negotiating a little bit further, but this is really, really difficult, and you've got to be really, really careful that you don't sort of twist these too much, put them under too much strain, because they will fracture, as you will see later. So we're reaching a little bit further with this. Again, we've got to do lots and lots of irrigation. Try not to push these too far, and it's just in and out, in and out, in and out. If you feel like you're getting a lot of resistance, don't push it. With this is just very, very light watch winding technique, so I'm not really pushing these down any further. And then I'm going to try and increase the file size to a size 10. So we've got to about 15. That's as far as we've got. And I want to just sort of possibly release some of the grip of the canal space further up. I'm using a size 10 here. And again, it's the same sort of action, very, very minor, kind of back and two. You're not pushing it too far. Again, lots and lots of irrigants, and then we're going to go in with our 1403. And this is kind of, remember, we were going to try and release the grip of the canal space around the file. And you can see here I'm going to use the glide path file at 14. So this is 0.1 millimeters away from the furthest point reached. And again, really, really careful here. You know, this glide path file is shaped 3 canals already. So believe it or not, rotary files have a finite rotary action on them, so they'll only turn and cut a certain much until they'll break. So you've got to be really, really careful. And we can see now that the orifice is a bit more open using these higher diameter files. There is an argument to say, of course, that, you know, you just replace it, but it's kind of one of those things, isn't it? What we're going to do now is we're going to check confluence. So I'm going to place a GP cone into the MB1 canal at length. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a hand file into the MB2, and just to try and see if they join, because if they do join, this MB2, the file that's in the MB2 is going to mark the GP in the MB1, and and sometimes you can sort of feel that kind of spongy feeling like you're touching a GP cone. In this case, I didn't really feel that. I managed to get the definder to length, or as far as we can get, and when we inspect the GP, we can't see any mark at all. And this is a strong indication maybe it joins a bit further down, or it's got its own portal of exit. And what I mean by that, it's got its own canal space. So I'm going to try and negotiate a little bit further with our size 8. Again, I've measured this to 15, and now we are starting to reach really, really far. And then when we take it out, we've got an extra 2 millimeters. And this is essentially where we've shaped it from the coronal third. And then it's the same again. In this case, though, I measured the glide path file at 17 rather than 16, so there's a bit of a mistake there. But again, I'm not going to be pushing that any further. Although, if it feels like it's going to go, don't be tempted to shape it even further, because you are going to ledge that canal space. And then we're going to do the same sort of protocol. So we use the 1403, same as the DB, we're using the 1802. In this case, we're just using a rotary action. And then I'm going to use a little bit of an orifice opener just to shape this a bit further. I didn't use the orifice opener straight away in this case, mainly because I was slightly concerned about ledging. And then we're going to just use the same process as before. We're just going to try and shape the canal space with our little hand files, and just checking the sort of the working length to see if we've got any kind of action at all. I'm going to check confluence again with a GP cone, and then this is about 17 to 18, and we've still got no mark. So to me, this is thinking that the MB2 and the MB1 have their own separate portals of exit, or if they do join, it's probably right at the apex. So we've got a little bit of a fight on our hands to get to the end. I do place our definder into the canal space, and when we hook up the apex locator, this is again probably about 18, 19, and we're still getting no 0 on the apex locator. Again, I'm going to just go down with a definder. I suppose you could argue, should I be using a size 6? I feel like at the moment we're kind of negotiating quite slowly, and here I'm just having a little bit of a fiddle around with the apex locator, and we pull it out and we can see that we've got our 0 reading at 20.5. So we've got a 0 reading with our size 8 definder. So this is great. We're then going to try and reach 0 with a size 10, and I am just really genuinely gently watch winding here. And again, remember we were talking about this sort of cyclic fatigue you can get with files, and this Definder's done a lot of twisting and pulling, and then as I pull this out, straight away catches my eye. I can see that the tip of this file is shorter or blunt. Usually you'll if you do root canal for long enough, it catches you at the side, at the corner of your eye. A lot of the times what happens is I think it's blunt, and I'll sort of be looking around for my ruler, and I'll measure it and go, oh, it's still 25 millimeters, but this is clearly shorter than usual. We know the zero reading on this MB2, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and bypass this, because it is a very, very small file, but the problem with trying to bypass this at such a far down level is that there's a risk that you fracture the file with the thighs 8 as well. So I'm just having a tiny little tickle with the 8, but I don't want to be pushing too far. In this case, it transpires that I don't actually get to length quite easily. So essentially what we have to do here is we have to shape up to the fracture, which is not ideal. And of course the patient was informed that a tip of the file had come away and it might affect the prognosis. And then once we've sort of shaped up the fracture, what I did is just take an x-ray just to sort of visualize where the file is, and we can see just in the tip there that it's right at the end of the tooth, which is really, really annoying. So our next sort of challenge now is to try and obturate at least up to this fracture file, and try and push some of the obturation material past this point. And of course the issue with doing something like that is that it's likely that this MB2 canal space was quite sclerosed. So, this is likely just blocking the canal space, and trying to push any sealer past there is going to be really, really difficult. But we take our Confluence radiograph, and we can see here that it looks really, really nice. We've got all the cones to length, but we can still see a little bit of that fracture file in the mesial root. And then we just do our obturation. Again, there's plenty of videos talking about obturation. I think the most important learning point here is how to manage a fractured file when it's further down. And what I've tried to do is just try to push some of the biceramic sealer into this space. And overall, this is a really nice root canal. We've got this kind of mushrooming, or like a little bit of extrusion of the sealer here to try and it kind of seals the end of the tooth. But we can obviously see that the MB2 has still got this fractured file in. And I suppose you could argue with yourself, when we sit the patient up, we don't sit the patient up at the end. What we do is if we fracture a file, we sit the patient up straight away, and we have a conversation about things, and the patient's sort of reminded about the consent process, and she remembered there's a possibility a little bit of the end of the instrument can break away, and then they're just given a choice, either have the tooth removed or filter as far as we can get. And I would say 999 times out of 1,000 people go straight for the filter as far as we can get. And you've warned the patient, you've consented the patient, and I think that's an acceptable thing to do. So overall, a nice result. If you love the channel, please like and subscribe. If you want to bring your support for the channel even further, join the membership program. Again, I'll remind you, we have got early access to content, and also we've got exclusive content for you to watch. And all that's left to say is have a lovely day, keep up the endos, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.